The topic that we're going to be getting through, advancing social justice as a national and global imperative. How do we get it done? We're going to run through some questions. Professor Ben Turok, let me begin with you. Let's first talk about your understanding of the challenges currently which are facing the economy.
Well, thank you. I think our biggest challenge is that South Africa has reached a kind of stalemate. My feeling, and it's a gut feeling, it's not scientific and it's not based on economic analysis. But I think the argument about distrust, which I agree with in part, but we have a government and the government must be called to account. So even as you're distrustful, you have to call the government to account. But the reason why the distrust is raised, and I think that a lot of us feel a sense of unease, is because there's a kind of intellectual stalemate in the country, and I think it goes back to 1994. You see, when the minister said, I'm repeating something I said earlier, but it seems to me it's totally appropriate. The climate in South Africa today is not one where the M-Plan can succeed by itself and the momentum has to be created because of the stalemate that our country is in. We seem to have a political stalemate. There's a lot of petty negotiations in the political sphere without any really dynamic alternatives emerging, frankly. Let's say that. And if you're going to distrust the government, okay, are you going to trust the opposition? You know, where are we? So it seems to me that this meeting should maybe come face to face with the fact that a kind of a doldrum has settled in our country where new ideas need to develop, new initiatives need to develop, where civil society has a major role to play, where the media has a major role to play, where the courts have a major role to play. It's not just civil society and some romantic notion that if you take a high moral position, that this is going to win. It needs a great deal of thought, a great deal of planning, a great deal of commitment. And so I say that I am very uncomfortable with the fact that we are in a mood of stalemate in the economy, but also politically, and maybe even socially. Hence the alarming statistics of inequality, poverty, and all that. All those need to be seen in a context of why is our country so stale at the moment. And it seems to me that if the M-Plan is going to have any traction, we have to find a way to energize alternative ideas and a new momentum. We need a new momentum in South Africa.
Nicky, your organization in many ways helps facilitate this economic activity. Do you agree with what Professor Turok is saying as far as a stalemate is concerned and the core challenges that are at the heart of the country's economic challenges?
Yeah, I mean, completely. I think that the stalemate comes from a sense that there is no direction, no clarity in the direction of the country. If you just take an example for ourselves as individuals as an example, would we go and build a new house somewhere if we didn't know that the property was ours, that it was going to be there for that the investment we made we would be able to realize over a long period? That lack of clarity of direction, of policy direction, really has an impact on investor confidence. If there's no investor confidence, you get no growth. If we don't get growth going, we cannot deal with the social justice issues that we've been talking about today. We simply cannot address those with a shrinking pie. We actually have to get growth going so that we get a better fiscus. We can enable the state to actually deal with what it needs to deal with. We can enable the private sector to deal with what it needs to deal with. So this sense of a stalemate is something that when I talk to CEOs, it's a real challenge because you have people who are committed to the country, who want a country that is thriving, because we all will do better if we can uplift ourselves together, everybody together, we will all do better in a thriving country. But the opportunity to do that is much easier, much better if we have a clear direction from government and a clear move away from long on policy and short on action. We are full as a country of ideas, but we don't actually execute them in the way that we should. So I think that there's a real need for us to recognize that this moment doesn't resolve itself. It resolves itself because we have a passion to make this country better, and that we demand of each of us in our own spaces, of government in its space, to take action that moves us forward, and we can talk a bit about that.
Sure, thank you so much for that. Former President FW de Klerk, if you knew then what you know now, and in the context of this conversation on social justice, would you have pushed for a different pathway in terms of handling the legacy of inequality in this country?
Can I say that, if you will excuse me, I'm going to speak from the podium because I prepared some notes in order to ensure that I stick with my time.
Sure.
The short answer to that is, I believe that the Constitution as it is does provide a pathway to social justice and to greater equality. I think it has laid the proper platform and created the necessary space for government and civil society and everybody to promote these two important goals. One of the greatest disappointments of our new society has been our failure to promote equality. The achievement of equality, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the core foundational values of our Constitution and is inextricably linked with other core values, including human dignity and the advancement of human rights and freedoms. And yet, 25 years later, South Africa is a more unequal society than ever before, than it was in 1994, and it is more unequal than most unequal societies in the world. This is despite Section 9(2) of the Constitution, which empowers the state to promote the achievement of equality by taking, and I quote, legislative and other measures designed to protect or advance persons or categories of persons disadvantaged by unfair discrimination. The legislative and other measures that the state has taken to advance equality have focused primarily on affirmative action and black economic empowerment. These measures have indeed advanced the equality of the already most advantaged section of the middle class, but have done very little or nothing to advance the equality of the most disadvantaged 60% of our population. Although there is, ladies and gentlemen, a place for balanced affirmative action in any comprehensive equality program, the government's AA and BBBEE policies have demonstrably failed to advance equality throughout our society. In my view, what we should have done differently to advance equality would have been to provide decent education to all our children, to provide proper social services and health care, to provide adequate housing, to provide security and protection by improving the police and justice system, and above all, to create full employment by assuring high levels of sustained economic growth. Government has failed to provide proper education, health care, and social services. It has done quite well with housing, and for a few magical years between 2005 and 2007, under President Mbeki and Trevor Manuel, achieved the 5% plus growth rates that we need to create employment and to advance equality. True equality can best be promoted by adopting the policies necessary to vastly improve the quality of education, healthcare, social services, security and justice, and above all, to achieve high levels of economic growth. The single easiest way to advance equality almost overnight would be to issue proper title deeds to the 7.5 million black South Africans who own their homes and who own agricultural land. This could create and generate wealth overnight of R1.5 trillion in the hands of more than half of our households. If we want sustained economic growth that is so essential for the promotion of equality, we should abandon destructive ideologies and revert to the pragmatic macroeconomic policies that were implemented by Trevor Manuel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to come to you, Mr. Pali Lehohla. Perhaps if you can give us an overview of the distribution of opportunities, whether it's privileges and resources in South Africa. And is there in any way a fair distribution of these resources, of these opportunities? And what do those at the bottom end then have opportunity to?
Thank you very much. In terms of distribution, I think we've remained in comatose position in terms of the Gini coefficient, which is about 69%. I would argue that the NDP was very lackluster in suggesting that it would reduce the Gini by about 2% by 2030. I don't think with that kind of low movement of the Gini, we are going to achieve anything in terms of social justice in the country. If we think about what was inaugurated by the president in the implementing scenarios, one, Gwara Gwara, the other one is Bourgeois, and the other one, Naila Walk. Increasingly, which was done, it was done last year, increasingly we are in the what is called the East Bourgeois scenario, which is the enclaves. They are increasing. And those enclaves will soon be in the Gwara Gwara scenario, where everything bans and people claim their rights as rioting and banning. It is very difficult to envisage a Naila Walk in the future, short of really working as social partners in the country. What happened? I think we are having a deep crisis. The police budget is 97 billion and they are supposed to protect us. Private security is 60 billion. And we are not getting any better secure as a country. Fences in Jansen are getting higher and higher. And we can see that these easy bourgeois or the enclaves are increasing at an alarming rate. And this is a race to the bottom. Health expenditure is getting higher, 160 billion for private sector, 130 billion for the public sector. And we are thinking about the NHI, and the debates on this are raging, to no benefit in improvement of health, and we are getting less healthy. Universities. We actually do not dip our bucket where we are. I argued in my submission to the Commission on Fees must fall, that pay for everybody. Don't pay for the poor. The choir here, you wouldn't know who is poor and who is rich in that choir of Stellenbosch. You could see that they have removed the enclaves. Yet when they leave from that stage, going back home, they are back in those enclaves and back to those riches. Their song was saying to us, we need a different South Africa. But if you separate students along the basis of you fund the poor and the rich, they cannot have a joint project on what the future South Africa will be. They can only do it in song and not in reality. The outcome of the fees must fall, which the students said, we want fees to fall. Government decided a path that said, for the poor. And when you start paying for the poor and not the rich, you create a schism for student issues. And the student issues were about fees must fall. And that's the only community that is together for a very long time. We at home, children at schools, we at work are all divided by race. Only at university are these people together. And we have decided not to spend an additional 20 billion to pay as well for the rich. and assign those students that song and say, define for us what the future is for South Africa. Besides, they are well positioned to do that. That's where we should keep our bucket. The Auditor General. He's appropriated for himself legislation to chase wrongdoers. Where is the role of Parliament and the Executive? What is their role? Parliament said, yes, go and do that, chase them. And yet we have an Executive and the civil service and Parliament that should hold wrongdoers to account. We have left that to the Auditor General. Now we have created a two-headed monster. The one that deals with the good, which is the Executive and the legislature, and the one who deals with the bad, which is the Auditor General. How do you run a government with that kind of a two-headed monster? You can't. So accountability cannot happen under the auspices of the new legislation that accorded the Auditor General bigger responsibilities. A plan. The president in the Soudan made a statement and followed by Minister Mtembu, who said there will be 200,000 jobs created a year with 850 billion, and there will be a million jobs in 5 years. Goodness me, where is the thinking in that? We have 10 million people unemployed. Where on earth can 200,000 solve the problem of unemployment a year? It shows that there's no inkling or any understanding of the magnitude of the problem that we are facing. Yesterday, Tito Mboweni issued a paper which says nothing about poverty, which says nothing about inequality, which says nothing about employment, except regurgitating, now for a longer period, 1 million jobs in 10 years. This is absolutely disheartening. It shows that there's a leadership that doesn't understand the depth and the magnitude of this problem. We need new thinking. And I think the M plan should come in so that we have the government and we can live better. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to come to you then, Busi, and ask. Nicky tried to explain the sentiment in business currently and agreeing with this notion of a stalemate. But from the organizations that you lead under BLSA, what is the general sense and sentiment about where we are as a country? And are any of the solutions that are on the table currently, are they viable?
Thanks, Cathy. So, for business to be able to do what it needs to do, first and foremost, we need a conducive environment. And I think this is precisely what Nicky was talking to. So this current environment of uncertainty, it is very destabilizing. It is destabilizing because markets are premised on certainty and the lack thereof is problematic. So it's therefore going to be difficult to try and implement anything when you don't know what the future holds. And I'm mainly talking about this from a policy perspective. And get this, Cathy, we don't have to like the policy that we have in the country, but can we know what it is? And I think the most frustrating thing is not knowing, because once you know what you're dealing with, then you find ways of actually working with that to achieve what you want to achieve. The second key issue that we currently have in the country at the moment is that of the political turbulence that is actually happening. It doesn't augur well, you know, for us as a country when we're trying to position ourselves as an investment destination. So I think as a country we're actually going to have to decide which is which, because we can't talk left and walk right. If we're saying we're trying to position ourselves as an investment destination, then it means that we actually have to augur certain qualities, and that means that there is some of the things that are actually going to have to be present for us to be seen as an investment destination. And I think we're going to have to be careful because the window of opportunity for us as a country is actually closing. The interest in South Africa is quickly diminishing. South Africa is no longer the only gateway into Africa. You've got Kenya, you've got Rwanda. So companies, you know, and businesses have got alternatives in terms of where, you know, they should enter the continent if they need to come to South Africa. So the self-mutilation that is currently happening at the moment is not, you know, auguring well, you know, for business. And I think we've been warned. The credit rating agencies currently hold a consensus view that South Africa, you are not going to be in a position to can actually effect the reforms that you need to effect precisely because of the factionalism that is currently going on. So I think we need guidance, direction, and clarity in as far as that is concerned. But the key one as well is that of a capable state. You see, we have learned as a country from the past 10 years how painful it is to work with a government that is dysfunctional. So we need a capable state for us to can be able to achieve what we need to achieve. There is a lot of expectations that actually are placed on business at the moment in terms of what business ought to do to change the economic trajectory of this country. But I think if you are going to be talking about prescribed assets, if you're going to be talking about changing the mandate of the Reserve Bank, if you haven't finalized what Section 25 of the Constitution is going to look like once it's amended, if you still have an ESCOM, we know now that we are going to unbundle, right? But the unions have clearly come out and said that if you dare unbundle, that is going to be a declaration of war. So are we unbundling or are we not unbundling? And to what extent is that plan moving along, and when can we start seeing results? And I think these are all the key issues that are actually bothering business. And unless and until you have certainty on that front, then unfortunately we are not going to achieve what we want to achieve. So that is the consensus and sentiment of business at the moment. We are worried that we're also not having the right conversations as a country at the moment. You know, and I don't want to belittle the issue of the public protector, but for me, in all honesty, that is just a sideshow. Whatever is happening in that office is derailing this country from the conversations that we ought to be having. Because when we are near a credit downgrade, right? When we are near credit downgrade, when we've got Moody's in the country, when we've got the medium-term budget speech, you know that is actually going to be coming up. When you have the international community focusing itself or its eyes on South Africa to say what direction is the country going to move, and you are having useless conversations, you know, that are not taking us anywhere as a country, it actually doesn't augur well. So can we start putting our best foot forward as a country to ensure that we salvage the 5 trillion rands economy that we have, and we ensure that the 57 million South Africans that have placed their hopes on the leadership of this country can achieve what they need to achieve.
Thank you so much for that, Busi. Professor Jansen, many of the speakers so far have spoken about the role of education and the need to better our education system. How do we do that, especially in line with the Constitution, without causing too much turbulence, as it were, to the system currently? So without having to go back to what we did in 2005 and overhauling the curriculum altogether.
Thanks very much, Cathy. Look, I think I agree with many of the speakers. I just don't know. I mean, I've studied education all my life, and I just don't, in different countries, and I just don't know how you get out of a dilemma such as we're in, economically, socially, politically, without a really solid education. You can try a tender, but then you probably end up at the Zondo Commission. You can try different kinds of shortcuts, you know, to enrich yourself. The truth is, any country, any medium-level economy that has turned itself around has done that, not just in Southeast Asia, by the way, has done that on the basis of investments in education. So I think the average South African knows that. You don't need to have a degree to know that the way ahead is through education. So let me just affirm two things, because I think this is really fundamental to answering your question. For South Africa, surprisingly, the private rate of return to education is the highest in the world. In other words, if you invest in an individual child's education, that person benefits enormously at a private level. The second thing is, our social rates of return are also amongst the highest in the world. In other words, the society benefits when you invest in education. The problem that we have is twofold. The one is inequality and the other is humanity. So let me just talk about the inequality. We've just finished a book on probably the 30 most elite schools on the continent of Africa that lies along the southern suburbs corridor from the City Bowl to Fisher. I must tell you, I grew up on the Cape Flats, but I never knew what incredible wealth is located within those 30 schools. They're all 70, 80, 90% white. The black people who come in there are, the president's children, the former Minister of Education's children. They had Rodians and Stithians and Herschel and bishops. And that tells you a story as well. So let me just add a footnote here. I don't think you must be in government if your kids are not in public schools. I mean, I really do. As a former dean of education, I made that a point, that I cannot be a dean of education and prepare teachers if my kids are in private schools. So my kids went to public schools. I'm very proud about that. But here's the problem. I don't know how South Africans sleep at night. I don't know how middle-class parents, survive. Because there's something called a conscience. Now how can you, in each of the 9 provinces, have a school that looks like the wealthiest schools in the world, okay? And 10 kilometers from there, you can drown in your own shit. I don't get that. There's something fundamentally wrong when you are not attuned to that incredible sense of inequality. So that is something that I think we really need to address. But the second thing is our humanity. It's not just what the government doesn't do, it's what we do to each other. So I'm still trying. Last night I woke up at 2 a.m. This time it was not to work, it was just a bad dream that I had. And it was a dream of Alice in the Eastern Cape, where a bunch of students are protesting, allegedly not receiving financial aid payouts from NSFAS. Maybe not. I've just been around long enough to know those stories are always more complicated than we think. And then they did what they did twice before, which is they go to the surrounding villages around Alice. They herd some cows into the town, and they hacked the cows to death. They hacked off. I have a picture of a woman student running back to her ears with the leg of the cow, and the cow's still alive. The police won't allow the King Williamstown SPCA, this is just a few days ago, into the town because of the volatile situation, because the SPCA wants to put the 2 cows out of their misery. Now here's the question. How the hell did we get here? Okay? And here I don't want to talk about government. Here I want to talk about another failure of education, which is not just the inequality. Because you can get the best matric results and still be a thug. Okay? You can get a degree from the university and still be a racist. What is important is to ask the question, what did we lose in ourselves? Because I don't believe people do that. You're not born with the capacity to hack a live animal. That's not what human beings do. That's not what we do as Africans. So how did we get here? So there's 2 things, We've got this narrow, this very anemic view of education that Minister Angie every January tries to fool you with. Oh, the matric results have gone up. What I want to know really, what else has not gone up, okay? And what is it? Yeah, I see those 2 watermelons there, thank you. What else has not happened, And that for me is, so let me just say this, 2 things. One is, what is government actually doing? So I don't think our government cares a damn. I've thought about this very long. I don't think they care about the children of the poor. They don't. So what does the president do? He engages in what some of my colleagues call magical thinking. He appears in a 3D hologram in Gallagher Estate that then transmits this image of the president to Limpopo. As my kids would say, WTF. I mean, what is this? Okay, my kids wouldn't say that. They're very devout Christians. But what is that?
Well, that's fantastic.
Let me just, thank you. So you see, when you engage in magical thinking, you don't deal with the problem. You talk about, drone flights that kids will learn the skills of machine learning and all of that. That's fine, but the only kids who will benefit from that are the middle class kids. Poor kids won't benefit. You need to read and write. You need to calculate. You need to be able to figure out who you are and where you're going. That stuff we've not dealt with, okay? And so you're not just in denial, you engage in magical thinking. So how do we get out of here? Briefly. As of this morning, there are 271,000 registered NPOs, non-profit organizations in South Africa. I can tell you now that if you took those organizations out of the system, this country collapses. Make no mistake. You fool yourself if you think your salvation lies in the State of the Nation address. I mean, those are performances, political performances. People here, like my friend Louise, she doesn't like me anymore, but here's Louise van Rijn from Partners for Possibility. She is, I've never seen somebody more devoted to building partnerships between principals of poor schools and business leaders. She represents part of the 270,000. Here's the problem. When you're dealing with 27,000 schools, you do need a government, whether you like it or not, because no number of NPOs can do that. And I'm afraid, I do not believe that this government cares a damn. And so we're going to have to, as Ben was suggesting, have completely new thinking about how we get out of this rut.
Thank you so much for that, Professor Jansen. It's interesting because one of the themes that's quickly emerging is around not just the vast inequality that exists, but also the excessive divide that is there, whether we're talking the economy, whether we're talking access to justice. So I wonder then how much work needs to be invested in bridging those divides and literally being able to get people from across the multiple sectors in one room. So getting people from Alex and Santon in one room to come up with some of these solutions. And should that be part of the investment that a project that embarks on social justice actually needs to do? I don't know who wants to take. Professor Turok, do you want to go for it?
Yes. We need to discuss the divide, but we're in a university. And a university does research and analysis. And what we want of Stellenbosch University is to tell us what is the nature of that divide and why does it continue. You see, what bothers me, going back to the idea of stalemate, is that there are continuities in our country which are often unmentioned, which you don't talk about, but which predetermine the present from the past and create divides based on a long continuities which we don't discuss and don't question. And I think Stellenbosch University, in looking at divides, not come up with a formula and say, let's put business and labor in one room, NEDLAC and all that. Yes, yes, you can do that. You need to do that. And by the way, you need government. There's no question in my mind. You can distrust government, you can be as skeptical as you like, and most of us are, but in fact, the reality is that we are governed by a government. And if you ignore it, you ignore it at your peril. In fact, the approach must be taken is, and if you like, yes, I'll use the word aggressive approach to government. Let's call them to account aggressively. That needs to happen. If that involves distrust, that's fine. But the main thing is that we should say, what are the bases, the foundations of our divisions? You see, it seems to me, going back to 1994, and I'm privileged to sit next to Mr. de Klerk here, going back to 1994, did we do anything to resolve the divides of that time? Did we do anything really serious to ensure that South Africa did not remain as divided as it was then? Why is it that our inequalities are so high? Our unemployment is so high. Our Gini coefficient is so impossible. It's not 0.64 only, it's 0.94 if you take wealth, right? So 0.64 is your income inequality, 0.94 is your wealth inequality. That tells you a lot more. We can discuss income, but we must also discuss wealth. Because what I'm saying is that there were divides in 1994 in South Africa which showed that inequality coefficient of 0.9. And we still have 0.9, which means we've not discussed and analyzed the sources and the origin and the nature of the divides. So we can talk about having a social justice and a moral society. But that won't happen by a magic wand. It requires thorough analysis, it requires thorough understanding, and then maybe we can come up with some facts and some knowledge. Thanks.
So Cathy, I'm an impatient sort of girl, and I also agree that it would really help to have different perspectives at the table to try and resolve to a shared vision about where we're going. But I come back to, we are long on plans and short on action. And I think that one of the things that could make a really big difference is from a starting point that says, in a flourishing country, there is always a space for a capable state. There is a space for a responsible business, and there's a space for an active citizenry. So what is responsible business? Maybe this is the time that we actually start to challenge whether capitalism is the right model to deliver equity to our people. I honestly do think that there is a place that we can act right now as individual businesses, not waiting for a big plan anywhere, to say, what about the fact that our social license to operate is far more important than our legal license to operate? What does that mean? It means that we should challenge ourselves, how we hire, how well we pay, how quickly we pay our suppliers. The equity that we can actually make happen through our commercial muscle today by changing our compass, I think could make a really big difference. And so I sort of encourage people to throw small pebbles in. I think it was Truly who was saying we can do little bits immediately while the grand plan is getting clear.
I think I need to build on what Nicky has just said. I mean, I work for Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, and in this space, what we've seen in Costa Rica has been, what does capital do? It has to put a lens on how it understands poverty. And this was inspired by the multidimensional poverty indicators that we generate, including those that we provide here in South Africa, and I'll get to that later. And in using that lens, they realized that yes, there are poor people in our community that work for us. And the question then, once they knew that, was what do we do about it? And the entire business in Costa Rica is now focusing on that, and the president is saying, well, what are you going to do to deal with the poverty that exists in your own employees? Now, if you imagine the intersection of looking at that and government looking at the same spaces, then we have a much practical plan of dealing with poverty, spatial poverty, which generally manifests itself in terms of where business is and who the employees are. The one point that in this data that we provide to government, or we produce as Statistics of Africa, the key thing that has been quite obvious is that unemployment as a driver of poverty now contributes 52% as a driver of poverty, unemployment. And that has grown from about 32% in 2000. Associated with it is lack of education, which comes in at 14%. It has dropped a bit, but so jointly, 66% of our poverty is driven by unemployment and education. The rest that politicians like to canvass people for votes on, which are important, make no mistake, housing, electricity, sanitation, all those contribute about 2% or 3%, and the needle is not even moving, even with the investments that are made there. A clear indicator of what choices we have to make. But I tell you, these people have their elbows in their ears and their thumbs in their retinas. They don't want to see. Hear nothing, see nothing. And it's not because they don't want to see. It's because the interlocutors of good planning don't exist in government, in the state. The technocracy can't plan. It's a compilation of archival files. And we need a modern planning system. And the intellectual processes that inform it, as Professor Ben Turok says. We need that. And without a good education, you really cannot do what apartheid did. 1860, the first rail line. in Natal. 1868, discovery, 67, discovery of diamonds. 1884, discovery of diamonds. 1887, discovery of gold. The rail line booms. The war made General Smuts the most important person in the world. And that's how apartheid became a prominent driver of physical development in South Africa. We need that kind of infrastructure, minus apartheid, to get South Africa going. Yeah. And it was built on technocracy.
I think you're raising a very important issue around inequality, and I think unless and until we focus on that, we are not going to achieve what we want to achieve. So actually my view is that the biggest ticking time bomb that we have as this country is inequality. And the longer we continue to ignore it, you know, very soon it's actually going to bite us. I watched with interest, it must have been 2 months back, Alexander community crossed the M1 bridge into Sandton. I don't know what the demonstration was about, but in my view, I'd like to believe that it had nothing to do with service delivery. Because if it had anything to do with service delivery, then they would have taken it anywhere else. They brought it to Sandton, the heart of business. Now, if we as business didn't sit up and pay attention when that happened, I don't know what is going to make us pay attention. You see, business can only prosper in a prosperous society. And business cannot continue to be an island of prosperity in a sea of poverty. So there's going to be a very deliberate intervention that is going to have to be done to say, how are we going to move the economy along? And our view as PLSA, the reason why we have chosen our first strategic pillar as inclusive socio-economic growth and transformation is precisely because we understand this notion and are actually putting plans in place to implement it. And the biggest lever that we realize we have is that of SMMEs. I came across this study which said that, you know, if you look at the SMMEs, small, micro, medium enterprises, the medium enterprises only constitute 3% in the SMME space, and yet they are responsible for more than 35% of the employment. Can you imagine if we as business, to Nicky's point, were to open our supply chain opportunities, were to give access to market to the SMMEs, and maybe double the medium enterprises number to just 6%? Can you imagine the dent that that would have on unemployment in this country? We ought to be worried to be sitting with 39% unemployment in terms of the expanded definition, with more people unemployed than those that are employed in all the provinces except Gauteng and the Western Cape. 56% youth unemployment. You know, if we were any other country, we should have declared a state of emergency, because this is what the situation is. It is absolutely unsustainable. And look, the focus ought to be on jobs. People need to have jobs so that they can get disposable income. Because you're sitting with a situation where you only have about 7 million people, if that number is not reduced, that earn enough to pay as you earn. And you've got about 17 million people that are dependent on social. I don't care which way you look at it, that is a recipe for disaster. We are never going to build a sustainable economy with that formula. It is just fundamentally flawed. And the solution, as it has actually been proven the whole world around, is the focus on SMMEs. So that is where we actually need to go, and that is where business is going in terms of making a dent in terms of inequality.
I agree obviously with, and I'm also very, very excited about the passion of my colleagues. But I don't think this government is going to move on the big questions. So, for example, I really don't think, it would be nice, but I don't think the capitalist system is going to be overthrown anytime soon. I don't think that there's going to be a spark of conscience about. So what we're going to do is, with the system that we have, what can we do that can appreciably shift the needle with respect to social and, in this case, educational outcomes? It seems to me the one thing that government does do is that when there is a concerted move against a particular policy position, it does shift. It doesn't do that openly, it doesn't do that gladly. And the curriculum revision is a very, very good thing. When a lot of us said this OVA thing is a bunch of nonsense, it took a while, before people came around. Now, there's one thing you can do that can fundamentally change the educational outcomes in this country, and that is to shift both the political attention but also the resource investment away from the upper ends of the system towards the foundations of the school system. If you invest heavily, the evidence for this is overwhelming around the world. If you invest heavily in early childhood education, if you really build capacity in the foundation phase of schooling, the longer term outcomes are much more positive. Don't forget that the polls data showed that almost 8 out of 10 of our children in grade 4 cannot read at the grade level. I mean, that tells you something went wrong. So when the minister says to you, the matric results comes up, what she hasn't told you has gone up. What she hasn't told you is that 500,000 of those kids dropped out, okay, or disappeared between grades 1 and grades 12. So it seems to me what we've got to sort of say is, where can we move the system? There's too much. Our politics is such, our political economy, this I learned from Ben, you never talk about politics without talking about economy at the same time. But our political economy is such that you're not going to see massive changes in the nature of government, in its social vision, etc., etc. What you can do, and I'm just talking about one slice of our reality, is to begin to make massive investments in early childhood education. I tell you now, that changes for a lot of people the outcomes we're looking for.
I broadly agree with everything which has been said. Just 2 remarks. From the education point of view, we are amongst the countries in the world which spends the highest percentage of our budget on education. It's not really a lack of money. It's a lack of quality. And part of the problem is the hold that some unions have over government in that regard. How can you get proper education if in some schools, some teachers work only 3.5 days a week? Something must be done about the quality of education and breaking the hold of trade unions over what should take place in our schools. Second remark, it's not as if there aren't good policies available. We have a National Development Plan, which was developed by the National Planning Commission under chairmanship of Trevor Manuel, under the vice chairmanship of Cyril Ramaphosa. But the implementation of that plan, which has formally been accepted by the government, is being sabotaged by elements in the ANC alliance group, in the ANC itself, and amongst its allies, especially the trade unions. So somehow or another, we need to revert to the National Development Plan and implement it with gusto and with enthusiasm.
I'm now going to open the session up there. Hands flying up. I'm going to have some assistance. So what we'll do is that we'll take a couple of rounds of questions. We do have some time, but in order to get to as many people in the room, I'm going to ask 2 things. Let's try and make not more than 2 points if it's just commentary, and not ask more than 2 questions. If you can be clear about who exactly you'd like to answer your question. And please, let's all keep it very brief. Thank you. So I'll begin in the front and we'll work our way back. Yes, sir.
Hi, good morning. Just quickly, the lady with a beautiful dress, the previous ones that sat, the one that sat second from the left, she mentioned something about life orientation, where they can study social justice. But in fact, what is busy happening, they're discussing to use condoms before marriage. So that's the first point. Second point, if they do going to set up something to discuss social justice, I think they must involve children, even if they're below 20, because it's their future. We didn't inherit the earth from our parents, we borrowed it from our children. So they're going to live in 50 years' time We're not going to be there, most of us. STEM. Then I just quickly want to say is, if we're going to make any changes, as people mentioned, any good change happens with hardship. If it's a bad change, it changes overnight, but that's not a good change. You must have a sustained period of hardship to change the country. So everybody must be prepared to sacrifice something to the benefit of the children, and then we will have a country. Somebody mentioned something about student fees. I don't think you must pay poor or rich people student fees. You pay deserving students student fees. So you must prepare to work. Okay, 2 points. But just to say, I really think at the end of the day, if one needs to pay poor people more money, it mustn't be funded by anyone except the people that's rich. It's like washing your car on a Saturday. What is it worth to you to get that car washed? What is an hour worth to a CEO that earns 128,000 Rand a day? Pay him that and not what the tables say you should pay a car washer. Okay? So what happens, and you pay him that and you deduct it from your own salary. So it's not going to cost the economy anything. Yeah, I've said a couple of things based on what was said, but I just think the future is in the children, and we must incorporate
Sure.
God Almighty into the equation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'd introduce myself again. I'm Mukhtarjan of the Council for Mauritius. I just want to say 2 points. I will limit myself to 2. I want to be bold. If you listen to, this is a wonderful panel. It's amazing to have such high caliber people coming here and contributing to making a difference. I always say this, and in this room, there's a lot of wonderful people. One person who's here making a difference and have the courage and the boldness to swift the wave of change is Tuli with the State Capture Report. Without this, we wouldn't even be sitting here today looking at the future. Now, the situation is, we a bus, we need to drive. The driver now is President Ramaphosa. According to Justice Malala, and everybody's saying it, is the ANC captured? Is Ramaphosa able to roll out his things? Or is he operating with a gun to his head? He's not going to do anything, like Professor Jansen says, if he's unable to do so. So how do we tackle this reality? We're sick and tired of sitting here and having resources taken down, all this abuse and corruption and money thrown out. What are we doing now with the billions of rands coming in? Service debt. You sit on the ESCOM board. It's shameful. It's disgraceful. And it's horrible that people sitting poor while money is wasted. And the thing is, crime pays. Where is the people who steal, do all those things, just get away with anything? We need to change, and the change is not a wave of change. We should all put our heads together, all our drops together, and create a tsunami. This is an emergency. We sit here and put a plan to employ 1 million people. They don't even employ 200,000 because there's no skills, the education sucks. So you need to make those changes really and stop talking and stop acting. You know, I'm from Mauritius, we got nothing. Our resources, 7% of the economy, 93% is intellectual property. You got mines, you got land, you got all of those goodies. Make it happen. This is a rich country. There should be nobody living in squatter camps. 25 years, you know, we know this country went back. And now we are suffering from a broken bus with the driver unable to go forward. It has to stop now. We need action. Talk. We need to, after this, we need to do this. And what Busisiwe is saying, economic growth. How is it going to happen when Moody's and all those things says it's not? So you need to make bold changes, and the wave of change has to be a tsunami. And we need to support the people who are able to make the change. Government. So let's support the people that says, we are here, we know what's going on, we want to assist you, we need to rebuild these institutions, whether it's a DPP, ABB, CDD, whatever this is, it has to happen now.
Sure, thank you so much, sir. So I'm going to have to start being slightly rude. If your comments are too long, I will interject and stop you in your tracks. So help me be a decent person, please. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. My name is Nkanyi, so I'm from the University of the Western Cape. My comment or question or remark is maybe directed at Professor Jansen, although any of the panelists can respond if they feel they can. Professor Jansen, I've listened to you speak quite a few times. I've read some of your work, and your passion for education really is unquestionable. But I think in addition to everything else that has been said, my observation is one of the problems with our education in South Africa is that it teaches people to be employees. And so as a result, we have a lot of unemployable graduates. I mean, at the University of the Western Cape, in the law faculty, on average, we graduate maybe about 300 or so law students. And around this time, I mean, my colleagues, lecturers here can tell you that we're inundated with students who want reference letters, because all of them are looking to be employees. Now, that doesn't help us deal with the issue of social justice, because the problem of unemployment of people who are degreed will be with us for quite a while. So how can we have an education system that teaches people to be innovative, to be critical thinkers, to create employment instead of looking forward to be employees? Because that to me is a major problem with our education.
Sure. I'll take the lady in the front and then we'll give the panelists an opportunity to respond.
We're not going to make any difference until we actually have the facts. So, President de Klerk, I want to take issue with what you said about education. My organization works in 1,100 under-resourced schools across South Africa. We walk into the schools, we're in the schools every day. It's not SATU, that's not the issue. It's not the unions. It's the fact that we have hundreds of thousands of people in our schools who have not been trained, equipped, and supported to their jobs. So I think saying things like it's the unions, it's just an easy excuse, because then we don't have to do anything, because then we can just blame the unions. It's a very practical human capital issue. And until we actually get off our chairs and go and deal with that human capital issue, we will be in the same situation that we are. So it's time for us to stop talking and doing. Let's go into these schools, let's go and support the educators. The difference between those 30 well-run, fabulous, wonderful schools is they have 30 fabulous principals, strong school management teams, strong school governing bodies, and teachers who've been well trained. It's not difficult. We can do this in the next 5 years if we decided we cared deeply enough.
Sure. Let me just pause there. I'm going to pause there and I'll take you first in the second round. Professor Jansen, a few of those questions were addressed to you, but I'm willing to take anybody else on the panel who's got a response.
Okay, so I think I just want to follow up on Louise. It is correct that we should start with the facts. So the facts about unemployed graduates is this. The data is very clear that you are much more likely to get a job, and a good job, if you have a degree. There's no question about that. So this is an argument for continuing to study, to get more education, etc., etc. You get a second degree, you have even a greater chance of getting a good job, etc. In South Africa, it works precisely because these investments in human capital, privileges the field. It does matter, however, which university you went to. Let me just be blunt. Okay, you will get a job much more easily if you went to UCT than if you went to the University of Venda. It saddens me, but that's the truth. Okay, and it does matter, what you come with besides the degree. Okay, there are a whole range of skills that employers look for. Things like signs of life, the ability to communicate, the quality of the CV, and how well you passed. I mean, if you pass with 50%, I'm not going to give you a job, I tell you right now. Okay, I want to see 70 and 80%. So the point is not just about getting the degree, even though the degree gets it. Having said all of that, you're right. I don't think we teach young people at school and university the broader set of skills that enables you to take initiative on your own, rather than wanting to work for a government department or a private sector firm. That also is true. But I want to emphasize the singular importance of moving beyond matric and moving beyond the first degree. I do think it is the unions. I have to agree here with Mr. de Klerk. I mean, if you read John Volming's report, which unfortunately the Minister won't release fully, in places like KwaZulu-Natal, make no mistake, the unions rule the roost in terms of teacher appointments, principal appointments, and so on. It causes huge damage to them. You will not see that in the 30 schools I talked about, okay? So we need to face up to that. Having said all of that, there's something we get wrong, I think, in education, and that is the notion that if I'm in a disadvantaged school, therefore, you know, I am going to get poor outcomes. I don't know, I blame my mother for this, but she taught me if they give you a check, you bloody well show up. Okay? Now I'm in schools every day. Yesterday I was at school in Ida's Valley. Throughout the period that I was there, half the school kids were outside. That's not a human capital problem. That is, are you as committed to the education of the children of the poor as to the children, your own children? Because unless you get that right, unless you understand that nobody is safe until everybody's child is safe, until that value shift takes place in your head, I don't care how much money government puts into education, okay? But if you don't show up, and let me tell you, there are some of the poorest schools in this country, historically and now, are some of the best run schools, the most efficient schools. It's not dependent on the resources, it's dependent on whether you value. You know, let me just tell you this. Every month, I've done this for years now, I give half of my salary for the education of children who cannot afford to go to school, or students who can't. I don't do this because I need anybody's acclaim. I do this because I know I wouldn't be here with you today if somebody didn't make that sacrifice for me to go to school and beyond school. And so there's a value shift that has to take place, not just a policy shift at the top, a value shift in which you regard other people's children as worthy of support as your own children.
Wow. What a great challenge for all of us there, Professor Jansen.
Can I just say in reply to the lady who says she differs with me, the unions is a problem. They are a problem. There's no question in my mind about that. But I did not try to say it's the only problem. I fully agree with her that the quality of principals, for instance, decides what happens in a school. A good principal in a squatter town can have good results and provide good education. But a bad principal allows the teachers not to work properly, etc., etc. So I agree with what she added, but I disagree if she says the unions aren't a problem.
The question of fees, I think we have to understand at a point in time, we have to really get to solutions. My argument is that the university students said fees must fall. And we should have used that power of 1976, when the students in 1976 rebelled against Afrikaans. We didn't enhance that power. The fees must fall is a feature of the same. We need to enhance the power of the students as a student body. And we must tax the parents and use that tax to pay for everybody so that they can focus on what it is that is students. The problem is, in the future, the poorer students are likely to spike, and the rich students will migrate from UCT to other universities, and reducing the quality of what happens in those institutions. We really need to integrate the student body, because that's what we need. We need South Africa to be integrated, and that space is the only space in South Africa where people have a number of years sitting side by side. In significant numbers, we could see the number of whites who were here against blacks. If that is the critical mass that we need, that's the critical mass that can drive this country forward. On the education, in Venda yields the same results as the IBE. In Billy, in 1 year, you pay 700 rand school fees. In IBEs, you pay 130,000. Where do you scale up? You can scale up to Mbili. In the Venda, in the mangoes, it yields the same results, if not better, if you were to standardize that on the ratio of what gets paid for what result. Mbili actually excels. SMMEs. You know, the Mashonistas are doing better in terms of supporting SMMEs. The government has piles and piles of institutions that attempt or claim to be supporting SMMEs and not to any avail. The SMEs don't even know them. So the kinds of things that we do as government need to change. And that change has to be driven by society. And I think this is where the M plan gives us pathways as to what is the line of sight of society in terms of the resources and our taxes that we put in place to change ourselves as society. Thank you.
So the gentleman in front raises very key issues, you know, around some of the issues that we should be tackling head on as a country, and I absolutely agree with everything that you've raised. And I think, let me raise this contentious issue, or let me answer it directly, about whether Cyril is captured or not by business. CR is not captured by business. I think we need to be very clear and direct about what it is that we're dealing with in this country. We know that the capture of CR by business around the CR17 funding campaign has got absolutely nothing to do with that. It's got everything to do with the fight back campaign that is currently happening in this country. You see, we are on record as saying that if there is anything illegal about having funded the CR17 campaign, then let that be argued at the courts. The reason why business wants the PP to step down from her office is because she is incompetent. Not because we say so, but because the courts say so. Her decisions have been found to be nonsensical. She has been found to have misdirected the facts. She has conflated legal principles. Her decisions are amounting to bad faith. I can go on and on and on. The reason why she has to step down, she is using her office for political shenanigans. Remember, we have implemented reforms in this country. Reforms that are meant to take this country forward. You're talking about ESCOM and actually the entire of the SOEs. The reason why PG has been dragged to the courts, it's got nothing to do with SARS or whatever the issues are around the pension or whatever the case is. It's precisely because whatever is coming out of the Zondo Commission has to go to the NPA. And people are going to have to be prosecuted. And obviously, these are the last kicks of a dying horse. People are fighting for their survival because they know what is going to happen. You know, ESCOM, as an example, is a crime scene because there was a deliberate attempt over the past 10 years. Actually, it was not an attempt. They succeeded because the SOEs have been hollowed out. The biggest albatross that we have as a country is the 670 billion guarantees, you know, that we have given to the SOEs. SAA is being bailed out day in, day out. But what I do agree with you, however, is that probably there's going to have to be some decisive action that is going to have to be taken. Around the SOEs, for instance, let's agree we are not going to be able to save all of them. And maybe we don't need to save all of them. Because some of them are strategic, some of them are not. We have no business whatsoever as government running more than 700 SOEs. We need to decide which ones are key for government to run and which ones are not. And those that are not key for government to run, I think let's release them either to the private sector or to other international players. So I think the focus ought to be, what are some of those things that we actually have to do to move the country forward? And I think the biggest frustration, I raised this earlier on, from a political turbulence and maybe a lack of decisiveness. And I think Professor Ben Turok raises this, a lack of decisiveness. You know, if you are going to change things, you are not going to please everyone. And if you are pleasing everyone, then you are not making enough progress. And I think the lethargy that we see in terms of the actions that we need to have in this country is frustrating from that perspective. And I'm all for a collaborative leadership, trying to bring everyone along with you. But at some point, you're going to have to draw the line in the sand and say, is the energy, time, and effort that I'm putting in bringing my adversaries over to understand what my plan is it worth it or not? And to the extent that it is not worth it, then you actually need to move on and implement some of the things that you actually need to implement, because this economy is going to collapse on our watch. Whether or not we want to make the tough decisions as a country or not, sooner or later those tough decisions are going to be made for us, because the debt to GDP ratio in this country is quickly moving to 60%. Zambia's debt to GDP ratio is at 66%, and the IMF is getting ready to intervene. The question we have to ask ourselves is how close we are as a country to that, and what is it that we can do to ensure that we avoid that.
Professor Turok, I wonder if you want to dabble then on some of these commentary, particularly as far as the politics is concerned. And Nicky, after that, I'll give you a chance too.
Thanks for asking me. I was going to volunteer. Because the last speech really inspires me. You see, I come from the liberation movement. And I spent many years in the ANC. And that's my history. And here I sit with reservations about big business. Frankly, we in the ANC had, and those, I'm not very active anymore in the ANC, but I belong to that school. And we had reservations about big business based on the history, based on many factors, based on the monopolization in our economy and so on. And now I hear somebody, a representative of big business, who is turning me on. That was an unfortunate turn of events. But, you know, I was going to say what emerges out of this discussion, because actually we need to try and come to some view about what it all means. And it seems to me that this panel has demonstrated something today which maybe some of us have been skeptical about. Namely, is it possible to come to a consensus? And I find it quite extraordinary that we have actually got a very strong consensus on this platform. Yeah, we can disagree here and there. You know, I'm not sure that I'm all that keen on Trevor Manuel coming back again. but you know, I spent 20 years in Parliament with Trevor Manuel, so, you know, maybe I had enough. But I think that for Professor Thuli and the other organizers, maybe it's necessary that we stand back a little from all the discussion and say, was all this worthwhile and what does it all mean? And frankly, it means to me that maybe if people with a bit of wisdom come together, as we have here, a consensus is even possible in this very divided country. And I very much welcome your comments, and I would hope that your members support you.
Nicky's here.
And Nicky, and your members, because it is marvelous having these wonderful women here, these personalities. Are they speaking in terms of a mandate from their organizations? If they are, this is wonderful news. But even if they're not, a consensus has emerged, and I think that all power to Thuli and her people, because somehow maybe something has happened this morning which could be very worthwhile. That's all I wanted to say.
So Cathy, I don't think we should be surprised at all that there is a consensus emerging, because the reality is we share a passion for this country, and we have a shared destination. We will go forward in this country together, whether we like to be together or not. And if we can find a consensus, a space where we can collaborate, that future will be far more positive than if we are in that space and at odds with each other. So I'm not surprised at all about a consensus. To speak to mandates, Busi speaks completely on behalf of the membership. This is our strong, the passion with which she speaks is our strong position with regard to the things that need to be said about this country in order for us to confront fully the issues that we must address together. But I want to come back to the point that I was making, which is that we should not wait for the big plan for the country to be resolved by someone else. We should take agency ourselves. We can make a difference in our own spaces, like the principals make a difference in their own schools, like business makes a difference in its own space, like politicians make a difference in their own municipalities and heads of hospitals in their own hospitals. We do not need to wait for someone else to show us how to do something better in order to achieve social justice. We do not need to reconceive capitalism in the sense of the business schools starting to tell us what a social capitalism looks like. But business people can run their companies in a way that is far more conscious about the impact on stakeholders. And I'm urging that we don't wait for that moment to happen, because this country can't wait for social justice to be real.
I want to put Nicky a little bit on the spot, and I wonder how difficult it is for you, particularly given the position that you occupy as the CEO of the JSE, to have this message then filter down to all of those entities which you help oversee. And is this a message that many of them would be open to or even receptive of?
So applause for that.
So it's a very interesting point. I mean, to be at the center of capitalism and to argue for a social perspective on how you exercise your license to operate. I would say internationally, my peers internationally think this is a completely crazy idea for stock exchanges to argue for a more social license to operate. But it took 40,000 people led by Mr. Malema to walk on the JSE to say we have no jobs, we have no voice in this economy, for us to realize as the stock exchange and then to start to lead the conversation with business about the fact that there is no sustainable future for this country unless there is proper inclusive growth. And to do that, you have to listen. And so we've been rabble-rousing in this regard ever since. And I would say that most CEOs, and that's why Busi can speak with the passion that she does, get the concept that there is a new way that we need to look at how we behave. But I would say that between the companies, there would be differences as to what that really means. But I will go so far as to say to some of them when I speak, you know, when you look at how you distribute the profits of a company, and you look at, for instance, bonuses, executive bonuses or executive remuneration, it might be nice to be at the top 10 people in the country, or give another R1 million to the CEO. What are you going to do with that R1 million? You're going to buy a painting or go shopping in Paris. What happens if you actually said, well, hold on, that R1 million would make a difference, a real difference to people who take 3 taxis to get to work today? And it's real, it's making it real. That is about justice. And I think there is a very great recognition that we have to lead by example as business.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. So I see you, Ma'am Rampel. I'm going to come to you in a moment. I promised the lady that we would open with her. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. My name is Jennifer Smout, and I'm a commissioner at the Commission for Gender Equality. And it has been so startling to sit here this morning and listen to all of these amazing points, but to hear the absence of the word gender, the absence of the word woman. And I think, as Professor Jansen said, we're going to be engaging in magical thinking here if we don't engage in these discussions from a gendered perspective. So someone else said, let's start with the facts. We have the former statistician general here, and I love Stats SA. It's my favorite place to go to for information. So let's talk about stats. It's girls and LGBTIQ kids who are facing violence on the way to and from and at school. It is girls who drop out of school because of family responsibility. It's women who are most affected by climate change, environmental degradation, and our ESCOM crisis when it's not safe for them to walk home because the street lights are out. They can't do the laundry, which is still their job despite having a full-time job sometimes. These are gendered crises. These are not something that has the same impacts. It's women who face uphill battles with traditional leaders to access land and with their partners. It's difficult for them to access land as individuals and not as wives or inheritors. 72% of the land in this country is owned by men as of the last land audit. It's predominantly women who are raising our children who we have to take care of. 43.1% of children live with just their mother, compared to 3% of kids who live with just a father. It's women who make up most of the people employed in the social justice sector that is saving our lives and our moral cause every single day. Whew. They say speak even when your voice shakes, and I've been sitting shaking for the last 5 minutes, so just bear with me. It's women who are affected by economic stagnation. 42.5% of women are unemployed in the expanded definition, compared to 35% of men. Addressing patriarchy has to be a central component of this project of social justice. And economic growth can and has and continues to happen at the expense of exploiting women's labor, of ensuring that they get paid less than men for work of equal value. And we've got a National Minimum Wage Act that excludes hundreds of thousands of domestic workers and farm workers from the benefits of that very small minimum wage. Economic dependence and inequality the research has shown over and over again a direct link to gender-based violence. And I will never forget the time when I heard in Parliament that 50% of women who drop their cases of domestic violence do so because they are economically dependent on the person who is abusing them. So if we continue to sit here, and I don't hear the word women for the rest of the day, and the panel's leaders do not ask that question, how does this affect women differently, then we are going to have failed, and I hope that we don't. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm watching you at the back. I'll take, I see there are 2 more questions at the back. So I'll take the 2 questions at the back, and I'm going to ask you to make your way to the front.
Thank you. My name is Peter Meeker. I value land for a living. I wanted to ask Busisiwe if her organization is aware of the most successful, 2 of the most successful countries in the world in terms of wealth per capita. They are Hong Kong and Singapore. And the reason why they're so wealthy is that they tend to tax people less, but land more. In fact, in Hong Kong, nobody owns any land. It's all owned by the state. So you pay rent. That's my question. Can we do this here? Thank you.
Hi, I'm an epidemiologist in global health, and so I have a call to action for spaces like this to include community-based organizations and leaders. So although our speakers, our panelists, and the participants of this community, of this conference, are all leaders in this space and have a wealth of knowledge to share, I think the core tenet of social justice is decentralization of power and privilege, and therefore I think we need to have more representation of our communities in this space. And I'm saying this now because everyone in this room will probably, have a space where we can convene these moments and generate this discussion, and to just think about those communities in which we serve. Thank
you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Edwin Kleerfus, and I'm representing the Social Justice Agency. My question specifically to former President de Klerk, and anybody on the panel that would like to respond. In all these critical issues mentioned today that we face in this country, economics, education, governance, etc., my question is, how do we deal with the issue of white privilege and white supremacy and the lack of buy-in by the white people in the transformation project? And can we do it without the buy-in from white people, or are we looking at civil war to see change in this country?
So I'm going going to ask you to come to the front, and when we begin the next round, we'll kick it off here and come to you, sir. I know your hands have been up for quite some time, so we'll play a little bit in the front. I see your hands right there in the corner. I'll come to you in the final round of questions that we'll take. So just hang on here for me. Responses to the questions that have been raised.
Well, regarding the last question, I'm not sure I got the question correctly. What I heard is, what do we do about white privilege? Is that a good summing up of the question?
Yeah. As what white people contribute to the transformation project in South Africa?
I think we should stop in South Africa overemphasizing race. We are back, I'll reply to your question. We are back at a situation where race is becoming too defining with regard to so many aspects of our daily lives. We got rid of apartheid. I've apologized for the pains that apartheid caused. I said it was wrong. But we mustn't fall back into a system where we have reverse discrimination. Whites have a contribution to make. Whiteness should not be regarded as something bad. Blacks should have a contribution to make. Brown people should have a contribution to make. We are together the South African nation. The Constitution provides for the recognition of our diversity on the one hand, and on the other hand, for the need to build the nation, to take hands across divides, and to unite as the South African nation, and to work for the benefit of the whole of South Africa and all its people. So, white privilege, if it's maintained and nurtured, is wrong. No privilege should attach to anybody because of the color of his or her skin. What we need is to really work together, is to build bridges instead of creating new chasms between us, is to, through conferences like this, also mobilize civil society. I'm no longer a politician, I'm in civil society now. The FW de Klerk Foundation have a center for unity in diversity. The whiteness, as driven by Malema, is something which can lead to the civil war you are talking about. Yeah. We need to fight racism wherever it comes from. Whether it comes from whites, whether it comes from blacks, whether it comes from political leaders, or whether it comes from individuals. Racism is wrong. It's prohibited by our Constitution, and we must unite around the value of communality as South Africans in one country, which we all love, and which need all its people and all the skills they have and all that they can bring to the table.
On the question of gender, I happen not to have girls at home, it's all boys, but I think statistics has socialized me to appreciate gender, particularly here in South Africa. And I realized that our execution of decisions is actually not sensitive to this issue of gender. I'll make an example. The law that enforced people to carry a certificate to cross borders for minors was very humiliating to women. And its reversal was not driven centrally by that humiliation to women, it was driven by something else, which was tourism. I found that absolutely very insensitive. The second is the chasm caused by the Fees Must Fall, which generally says if you earn so much, you must afford. And it looks at the joint income of the spouses. In the process, women and the children are actually humiliated in that space. Here is the source of this. 60% of fathers in South Africa say they are married, against 30% of mothers. Now, that statistic tells you about the fault lines in our system. And unless every plan understands that statistic, that there is a schizophrenia amongst men, that they are married to these women who have actually said, you are not, and who have actually not taken account of the children. It's a serious problem that government doesn't seem to be understanding. I try to emphasize it and explain it. Maybe I don't explain it that well. But that law means that that man who has long abandoned that woman has rights over that child when the mother wants to travel. And that's the time when he says, I'll show you. And it is, I'll show you all the time. And the gender lens in this social justice program is absolutely central. And that statistic is too telling to ignore issues of gender. Unfortunately, our policies and everything are so crude. There was a judgment that actually was passed when this lady took it to court. Because the school system was saying, no, your parents can afford, the mother and the father can afford. And it was only this woman who was carrying the burden for the child. And the law, the judgment said, no, the child must go to school at the rate the mother earns, not at the joint income. I'm not suggesting that men should be left to their own devices. The law must change that. But this is an ethic and a moral duty more than an economic issue. And we need to understand it. And our policies must be sensitive all the time when we try to implement the decisions that we have made. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We're going to take the last round of questions now, and I'll begin in the front. You can begin with...
Kathy, maybe when you come back, I can answer the gentleman who was asking about
yes,
our
please.
awareness. Yeah.
Yes, please.
I just want to also join Professor Turok in being absolutely thrilled that the two women on the panel are actually raising very important issues around the economy and the role of business. But I want to challenge you further, because whether you're looking at the issue of inequality as in income, or you're looking at issues of gender, business has not come to the party. And as Dr. Lehohla has said, you have so much power to change the face of social justice in this country. And I want to just remind all of us, there is a gentleman there who was talking about putting God there. I think God is always there. We don't have to put him anywhere. It's what we do with the God in us that says that to heal the breach between the rich and the poor requires a distinction between justice and charity. And I think business fell into the charity business, that they give all these big bonuses to the top, who are all mostly men, and unfortunately, Mr. President, there's still a lot of color coding even in that. And then they give the charity to CSI run by women. And I think in terms of changing the face of this country and its social relationships, business has got more power than it actually acknowledges. The second point I want to make is we need to challenge the model that says to attract investments, we need to create the climate for investment. What about business? What climate are you creating that will give confidence, not just to outside investors, but to the ordinary mamas from Tata, that they matter? Because if we were to regenerate rural economies from where business has extracted male labor, we would have a very different social system. And I think we need to remember that foreign investment will only make a difference when we, the internal people, invest in social justice with itself. It's
microphone, then to the oh wait, please pass it on to the elderly gentleman there. Thank you.
I'm so sorry, I'm jumping the queue a bit here. The last time we met was 20 years ago, today. My name is Ignatius Ferreira from Africa. I have been involved with the quest for social justice since 1939. I have one quick question for Nicky. She mentioned the idea that don't come with ideas that you can change capitalism like that with wild ideas. I believe there is a way. So I hope you will be here tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm delivering a 20-year-old message from the people on the ground, from the real people on the ground, about what can be done, what change can be made to capitalism. Not wild ideas, a practical, down-to-earth idea that I wish to present tomorrow. I'm having the opportunity. I hope you will be here. You don't have to answer now. And I hope my friend here will be here as well.
Sure.
Thank you very, very much. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure, thank you so much. Please take it to the gentleman over there.
Hi, I'm Brian Jansen from the business school, so I'm going to be following, I think, in the same vein. Nicky, your comments made me remember a critique of the consultative business movement, which was obviously an important player in the transition, but that business wants change, but that business does not want to change. Yes. And I'd like to know how many members of the JSE continue to reward McKinsey & Company and KPMG with business? Yeah. How many members of the JSE are implicated in end runs around community consultation by engaging known corrupt actors in local government and traditional authorities, in agriculture and mining? And when is business going to model the behavior that it says it wants from government so that business actually holds business to account? As you can tell, I'm worried about Ben drinking the Kool-Aid.
Sure. I'm going to take one more question from the front and then the two right there at the back, and we're closing off the session because we've unfortunately run out of time. Yes, sir.
Thank you for this opportunity. It's a comment with a question. My concern about the invitation to individuals to operate, whilst I laud that and encourage that, is that we mustn't forget that the neoliberal tendency is to atomize society and to individualize responsibility in order to distract us from systemic injustice and thereby systemic justice that needs to follow. I am concerned that there were opening remarks made that left me with questions about whether business actually wanted structured justice to hold them to account, especially comments made about assets and comments made about land. Often the favorite metaphor in encouraging individual action is the starfish on the beach being thrown back. But we need to center rather the question as to why the starfish are on the beach in the first place, in order to ensure that they're not just washed up on the beach again.
Sure, thank you so much. The two at the back, you've had your hands up for a while, and then we're going to wrap it up there.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Mark Roundtree. I'm from Patricia de Lille's new party. I agree, we're in a bit of a stalemate politically. Sorry. And definitely need some new directions. It's quite a brave statement in a room which is full of academics. I used to come from there as a scientist, not a sort of social expert. But I don't think we need more facts to change, or we don't need more research. We have a lot of information available. I think the decisions that we're making with that information is very bad. Just in Cape Town, we stopped, or the city of Cape Town stopped my city services to Khayelitsha and Mitchell's Plain 3 or 4 months ago. Those people are paying 4 to 6 times more and queuing from 4 a.m. in the morning to get taxis now. It's not hard to see how this impacts inequality.
I don't, here we are with all the social justice people, but who's phoned their councillor or is business putting pressure on that new leadership, unfortunately former president dominated by former National Party people, to reinstate those services? We know the problems with the trains that's been going on for years. In Cape Town at the moment, poor people are charged more per litre of water than rich people because of the way the tariffs are structured, and there doesn't seem to be a big outcry about that. And then we spoke a lot about how we're still sitting with, I'm white, I know, but how are we sitting with so many still white, wealthy people? If the municipalities keep giving development rights away to property owners, of course most of those property owners are white, and the biggest financial benefit is in the best located parts of the city, which were, of course, exclusively white. So
sure.
It's not hard
I'm going to unfortunately speed you along.
Okay, so I just wanted, we know all these things. What can civil society or business do to change the decisions that are being made at the moment?
Sure. Thank you so much. There's a lady right next to him who's had her hand up for just as long.
Hi, my name is Dr. Samantha Braid. I'm also a scientist, and this is a very interesting arena to be participating in. It was very briefly raised by Umama from Utata there about climate change, and in particular, to me, what's of significance that hasn't been talked about is the issue of water. Our legislation and our constitution recognizes water as the right to life, and life is where everybody starts, poverty or not. And the current situation of our water sector in the country is an absolute disgrace, given that we have world-leading legislation. And that needs to be a topic that we talk about. How do we start with these basic resources that we need in order to bring people out of poverty? And how do we build that social justice, needing these resources, but our government structures they've let us down.
All right, thank you so much for that question. We'll leave it there with this session. What I'm going to ask the panelists to do is that in the answers and the responses to the questions, if you can please include your closing remarks, because by the time the last speaker comes on, we'll then have to break for lunch. Busi, I'm going to begin with you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kathy. So the gentleman raised the question around, are we as business aware of what other business communities are doing in most successful countries? And the answer is yes, we are. But you see, for us as a country to compare ourselves to those successful economies, you're probably going to have to say, what are the conditions precedent? What environment do you need to have from a business perspective for you to be able to achieve what you want to achieve? And I think allow me to just speak to the key 5 factors of production that you actually need as a business. The first one being land, as you spoke to it. In as far as land is concerned, I think I already said this earlier on. We don't want policy that is probably going to be good for business necessarily. What we want around policy is certainty. So irrespective of what we do with the land in this country, but can we get some level of signaling in as far as the property rights are concerned? Because every investor would want to know that. So we need to know which direction we are going so that we know, where we are going to take things as business. The second factor of production being labor. Now, in an environment where the economy has not grown by more than 2% since 2013, you cannot have a labor regime that still demands 12% increases. It just cannot be. So there needs to be a conversation that is going to be held in as far as that is concerned, because unfortunately it does add to the unattractiveness of South Africa as an investment destination. And if you talk about capital, you're probably going to have to look at our corporate taxes and maybe the fact that South Africa is one of the countries probably in the top 10 that is paying the most or highest corporate taxes in the world. And you look at the infrastructure that we have in the country, from a municipality's perspective, it is not sustainable to have load shedding, for instance, of about 12 to 18 hours a day. If you agree that South Africa is an open economy and therefore we are not just competing with ourselves but with the rest of the world, tell me what your unit costs of production are going to look like if as a factory you have to stop production for about 12 to 18 hours because ESCOM cannot provide electricity. And from an energy security perspective, the electricity prices in this country have gone up by 523% in the last 10 years. The environment of doing business in South Africa is not what it should be, and I think that is just the pure fact. And from an entrepreneurship perspective, and I think a lot of people have spoken to it here, the education, you spoke about Hong Kong. Hong Kong and the rest of the Asian countries, their grade 5 learners are being taught coding and programming. We have grade 5 learners who can't read for many. Now, that is the skill set that we actually have to get as business. So, if you want to change things, let's start at the bottom. Let's start from the foundation. Let's start from ensuring that we get the basics right. And the unfortunate thing is that these kids of the underprivileged people are actually being made to lose the race before they've even begun running. Because that is precisely what it means. They are not going to just be competing with themselves, they are competing with the rest of the world. But they've lost this race completely because of the education system that we have. The culture of entrepreneurship in this country just doesn't exist. So when you talk about the factors of production, when you talk about the conducive environment that you need to have, when you talk about countries that are making it, well, those countries are allowing business to lead and government to follow. Those countries have the ease of doing business on their side. Those countries don't have prescribed assets. You know, we talk about prescribed assets as if it's still going to come. The banking sector in this country, which is one of the critical sectors that actually still work, one of the critical sectors that are the anchor of this economy, the banking sector has had to lend about R1 trillion to the SOEs. Now, that is coerced lending. That is prescribed assets by stealth, and it cannot continue to happen. Now, the actions that we're taking as a country and this government continue to undermine our efforts in terms of stabilizing this economy. And unfortunately, as long as the environment is not conducive for business to do what it needs to do, then unfortunately we're not going to achieve what we need to achieve. Thank you.
Pali Lehohla, your closing remarks.
Yes, I think I should repeat what I probably said, which is let's try and dig back at where we are. And in many ways, I would say that I don't know what happened to the South Africa Black Taxi Association SAPTA, which was a sign of black economic empowerment in itself, and how probably we should have helped it to deepen and diversify. And we allowed them to think about buying an aeroplane in a tough airline market. I think we are ignoring some of the nuggets we have, and we don't nurture them. And of course, that is why I don't think the government cares that much. And I don't think it doesn't care because it doesn't want to care. But it doesn't care because of ignorance. And in part, we need to get the information that already exists in a way that they can see. We have to force their eyes to open. We have to force their ears and remove the wax from those who have this responsibility, or the wax from their ears, from the responsibility, so that they can understand the responsibility and the futures they can for this country.
Sure. Thank you so much. Nicky?
So just to answer the three questions in the front, there are numbers of companies who still use KPMG, who still use McKinsey, who still use Bain, but I can assure you there are far more companies who are looking at whether they should, in fact, use those companies and how they have and how they are using them. So I would want to sort of caution, though, to suggest that just because a company has in the past done something that is completely egregious and wrong necessarily means that they can never rehabilitate. So there are deep questions that we are raising with each of these companies, as an example at BLSA, where they are no longer members of BLSA until such time as they have put their rehabilitation plans in place. So the point of the matter is that when these things happen, business is clearly saying, hold on, I don't need to be associated, I don't in fact want to be associated with companies that have a role to play in the undermining of the fabric of our society. So I think that's the answer in principle. The answer statistically, and since I'm sitting next to the statistician, previous statistician. I cannot answer the statistical number. I just don't have them on the top of my head. But there will still certainly be some companies still using them, but only after deep interrogation about what those companies are doing in relation to making sure that they have cleaned up house. And we can talk ad nauseum about what each of those are doing, actually. The question on the point I'm making about individual responsibility is not to deny the importance of institutionalized response on any one of these issues, but just to make the point that we have to also own our responsibility for our own action as business. And in fact, this is what I understood Rampela to be saying, actually, is that historically, in the past, business's approach to its responsibility to society would have been the chairman's fund, it would have been philanthropic, it would have been with whatever bits and pieces at the end of business we felt we could share outside business. But in fact, that's completely changed in a modern company. Business, a properly focused business, will recognize that it is a more immediate presence to its people than the state. For most people, business is a more immediate presence than the state, unless you're in jail or you run into the police or whatever. And therefore, the responsibility of how we do business is felt deeply. And I think you were really echoing what I was my core premise, which is that we should be flexing the way we do business in order to do that in a manner that actually advances social justice, rather than in a manner that just advances the pure focus of the winner takes all capitalism.
Yes, I can't resist the temptation to make a comment to my two business friends here. I find it quite unacceptable that the chief executive of Standard Bank earned 50 million rand last year. I find it quite unacceptable that the head of Old Mutual got 50 million rand last year and wants more. He's not satisfied with 50 million. So, you know, I think our friends here, who I've appreciated greatly today, I do have to say that there are problems. And the inequalities of South Africa are reflected in the way CEOs behave. And I think we need to call them to account. But I want to make a comment to my friend, Mr. de Klerk, if you will allow me. I agree that we are raising the question of race in a rather dramatic and maybe sometimes even hysterical way. I think so. And I think you're correct in saying that the whole emphasis on racial differences can be overstated, especially at the moment in our democracy. But when I made my first intervention, I used a word which was different. I talked about continuities. You see, even though we don't like to keep talking about race and whites and blacks and all that, but we also have to recognize that there are continuities in our system that the M-Plan will have to address. And therefore, if those continuities reflect social factors and social dimensions, we have to accept it and not deny it. So I agree. Let's not get hysterical about race and malema and so on are really poison in our country. There's no question. And extremely dangerous poison. And the way they keep fighting about race and whites and so on is really counterproductive to what we've been trying to do with our democracy in our constitution. But let us not at the same time deny that there are very serious structural continuities in our system, in our daily lives, that we as individuals and as groups and as M-Plan must confront. Thank you.
I have no problem with what you have just said. It cannot continue like it is. We cannot continue to have the percentages that we read recently in the press, about in management, the percentage of whites and so on. It must change. But there's another side to continuity. If we analyze why has service delivery deteriorated so much, because continuity was broken through unbalanced affirmative action. Where are the competent town clerks, town engineers, town treasurers, which used to keep municipalities on the right road? There was a lack of continuity in that regard, and that has led to bad service delivery.
I agree.
Good, so you and I, and that brings me to my closing remark. You spoke of your appreciation of the consensus which appeared from our participation here today. I agree with that. The challenge for civil society, and civil society has a crucial role to play in keeping our country on the right road, in preventing our country from falling over the cliff. The challenge is to continue to build this consensus, and at times to work together and take hands. Foundation A and Foundation B and Organization C and Organization E must sometimes say, let's form a team on this particular issue and work together to maximize the impact that our influence have with regard to making things better in South Africa.
Okay, so I travel a lot these days speaking with communities and schools in the 9 provinces. And what gives me enormous hope is a very simple observation, and that is that the number of good people in this country far outweigh the criminals, far outweigh the crooks in Parliament, far outweigh those who do damage to this country. I'm not surprised by this consensus at all. It is, in fact, what you would see in the broader South Africa. Our problem is we place so much attention on the rabble-rousers, on the race-baiters, on the Malemas on the one side and the Kalikrils on the other side. That is not where most South Africans are. And I think what's left for us is to find, not just keep the consensus. Let me just say this. There were 2 race wars that threatened this country's future in the past. We tend to forget. We don't think, as historians, the one was coming out of the South African War, the Boer War as we used to call it. People really thought it was over, and then 1910 happened. Well, they sort of forgot there were black people in the country as well. But, you know, it was going south fast. My generation didn't think I would ever sit next to Mr. de Klerk. In fact, I used to hate him. I say that with embarrassment, but I used to hate him because he was in charge of higher education, you know, national education, and so on and so forth. And here we are today, and we can talk as fellow citizens and figure out how we can build on each other's contributions to make this country really what the Constitution promises it can be. And I'm very proud to be in that capacity. So I think we shouldn't panic too much. We've been here before. Okay, we will get out of this, but my faith does not lie in Parliament. My faith lies in the South African people who made it possible for us to get here and to get out of this mess that we're currently in. And in that sense, I want to say to my colleague, Prof. Tuli, you've done a great job here. How do we leverage this consensus to build this country along the lines of the Constitution? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of the panelists who've contributed so meaningfully this morning. We're going to adjourn for lunch, but it's not going to be a long lunch break. It's going to be more of a working lunch. So it'll be served in the same way that tea was outside. If you can grab whatever it is you would like to eat, please come back to the room because there is another session that has to get underway. It's the lunchtime roundtable, and we'd like all of you to be able to be part of that. Prof. Madonsela is going to be facilitating it. I think maybe what we can do is we can give everybody about 20 minutes to get something to eat. So if we can meet back here at 20 past 1, that will be absolutely wonderful. Thank you.